don't know that I've seen that greeting for any politician lately, have you? Am I the only person in this room that thinks that we're living in the twilight zone right now? How many people here have been watching what's going on in Ottawa? How many people are disgusted? Me too. And I'll tell you something about Ottawa. The media says that the people of Ottawa are terrified and they want everybody out of there and this has to end. And that's not what I saw. I saw people from Ottawa walking the streets, their children handing out handwritten cards to truckers saying, "Thank you, you're my hero. Thank you for standing up for our freedoms." To truckers. When I was little, my mother told me if I ever get lost or I'm scared and don't know what to do, that I was to find somebody in a uniform or somebody in leather on a motorcycle. That's what my mom told me. And right now, where we're at in Canada, I don't know how many parents are going to tell their children to go find someone in a uniform right now. They're more likely to say, find a trucker. And not that truckers aren't great people, but that is very disturbing. It is. This is very serious. Our confidence in authority has been decimated over the last 2 years. And now our confidence in those that we think are there to protect us is being destroyed. In the last few days, I said this in a live earlier, I'll say it again, and this will become part of my sermon. I'm preaching a sermon today, so this will become a church service very shortly, which is protected under the charter.
Amen.
I said over the last few days, democracy died.
It did.
But it hasn't been just the last few days. This has been 30 years in the making. It's been slowly getting to the point where we have a prime minister using force against peaceful protesters. And I was there. That was peaceful. 100%. I've been ordered by a judge to keep the peace, and I kept the peace, as did everybody else out there. So before I continue on that, I'm going to get into my sermon. Yesterday, I was feeling very, very discouraged. I felt like I had abandoned the fellow Canadians that I was standing with in Ottawa because we had to leave. We had engagements here. Carrie and Jess had to get back to work, and there was some family health issues going on. Since then, we lost a family member, but we had to come back. And I had a phone call with my good friend Bob Leon, and I was talking to him about this before we left Ottawa, how I was unsure, like, should we stay, should we come back, what do we got to do? And he said, you know what, Chris, the folks in Coutts, they need you. They need some support down there. So maybe you should just come back to Alberta and be with Albertans and support them. And I thought, okay, well, that's my sign. So we hit the road. Shortly after, democracy died, and we witnessed it on social media. So yesterday, I'm very discouraged. I didn't know what to do. What was our next step? Where do we go forward from here? Did we lose? And something that I've said to people was running through my mind, and that is, oftentimes we have this idea of what winning looks like. We construct this image in our mind, what it looks like when we come out on the other side successful. And when it doesn't happen that way, we have to realize that whether you believe in God, whether you're religious, or you believe in a balance of the universe, there's a plan. No matter what we do in this room, God has a plan for us. So I got a phone call out of the blue from my friend Peter from Coutts Alberta. And I told him how I was feeling, and he said, Chris, I'm going to share a story with you. And here starts my sermon. When Jesus was traveling around, spreading the word and spreading love, and his apostles were following him, standing with him, his apostles had this idea of what it looked like to have the King of Kings win. They had this idea that meant that he's sitting on a throne with a crown of gold, and the Roman Empire falls, and the king is ruling. The true king is ruling. And it didn't work out like that, did it? One of the apostles went so far as to cut off the ear of one of the Roman soldiers who was marching Jesus to the cross.
Malchus.
Yeah. And Jesus said, don't do that, there's a plan. This has to happen. And the apostles didn't understand because they had this idea of what winning looked like. In the end, Jesus died on the cross. He was put in a tomb. And there were some who thought the idea of the King of Kings was dead. But it wasn't, was it? That was part of the plan. Because as human beings, what we think is so far removed from a divine plan, or if you're not religious, from the balance of the universe, that it's impossible to see. So the win in this case was every person who ever exists on the planet, their sins wiped away through the blood of Christ. A win that couldn't even be comprehended back then. But that's what winning looked like. Winning was somebody dying on a cross and raising again. And looking back over that, as a Christian in particular, you know, it's very obvious what winning really was. Now in this case, I mentioned democracy died over the last few days. But does that mean that we have no chance at democracy? Does that mean we lost? No. It doesn't. Because winning for us in this case, it may not be that we go to Ottawa and we force the government to drop the mandates and we all go home happy and free. Winning in this case is people getting tear gassed and beaten in the streets by those who we thought were there to protect us. And the win there is that now people see. They see these problems that we have in Canada that people like me have been talking about for about a year. I mean, I've known we have these problems for years, but never spoke up. There's others who have known this for 40 years. And others around them tell them they're crazy because we live in a free country. And we have the RCMP to protect us. And we have all these people who swear an oath to us. They do not swear an oath to us. They swear an oath to the Crown and the Crown's interests on behalf of the government. People have this idea that these three branches of government, the legislative, the judicial, and the Crown, are in this balance to protect us in the middle. And over the last 40 years, that's changed. Now what that does is we're stuck in the middle because they conspire against us. They create laws that keep us in submission. And then when men like me stand up and we speak out and we say, I don't give a shit what you say about me protesting. I'm going to protest because that's my charter right. There you go. I got my swear word in there. When men like me do that, they put us in jail. They send men with guns and they put me in the back of a car and they put me in jail. And they say, well, if you want to prove that you have the right to do this, you have to go to court at your own cost, fight the government who has an infinite treasury of your money that they can fight you with. That is not freedom. What we're living right now is not freedom. It's an illusion. It's an illusion that starts in elementary school when our teachers tell us, oh, Christopher, you live in the best country on earth. It's the freest country. You can be anything. You can do anything. You can prosper. You can succeed or fail on your own accord. That's a lie. We can only be free at this point when the government says we're free. We have a prime minister who at the stroke of a pen can give his RCMP, Trudeau's RCMP, all the power they want to do anything. They can smash your window and drag you out of your vehicle. They can trample you with a horse in the middle of the street. They can do anything they want to you because our prime minister says they can. And this isn't anything to do with democracy. This isn't Canadians saying, okay, we have a problem, and yeah, we agree with you, Prime Minister Trudeau, that we need to give the RCMP these powers to protect us. It doesn't work like that. 90% of the people in Canada could be against it, and the Prime Minister can make it happen. And he has. And it wasn't just him. They own the media. The legacy media. every single media outlet that feeds at the trough of the Canadian Media Fund. I'm sitting in Ottawa and I'm watching truckers feeding homeless people. I'm watching them shovel snow off sidewalks and streets, clearing streets by hand. Wellington was cleared with hand shovels by truckers. That's the kind of things we saw. We saw hugs. We saw who knows Pastor Henry Hildebrand? That dude is amazing. And so is his son. They're awesome men. I watched him give a sermon on the stage. Right after, I watched a Muslim person go up and read from the Quran. The next day, the Hare Krishna folks got up there and did their never-ending chant, and we had to fade them out with music. It was absolute, complete unity of the Canadian people. Every race, every gender, both genders, every gender, who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Everybody was there, united for one reason: end the mandates, take our freedoms back. And what did the media say? Every crime committed in Ottawa, everything bad, was attributed to those protesters, those men and women who were standing up for their rights. And in some cases, not even for them, for other people. A lot of the people in that protest, they had their QR codes. They could do what they want in this society. And they went out there and supported this for their friends and neighbors. That's what we saw. And the media was completely silent. As a matter of fact, they told you that, oh, this is horrible. They got to get out of here. They're throwing poop on the walls. That's how far they stooped, the media. They stooped all the way to poop again. They told you that it was a racist event and there was white supremacist symbols and there was all sorts of hate and people were being threatened and businesses were scared to open. Do you know why businesses were scared to open in Ottawa? Because the mayor and the chief of police told those businesses they had to close because the truckers were coming and the truckers are scary. And the only people that had anything to fear from those truckers was the government. Because people were standing up for themselves. But the media, they missed the mark. They failed to report on the most monumental thing that's happened in Canada, at least in my lifetime. Where's an old person here? Who's old as dirt? So for those of you that are old as dirt, have you ever seen anything as momentous as what happened in the last month in Canada?
No, never.
And the media missed it. They spat on it. And how important was this? That the entire country, the majority of the country, the small fringe majority, united. They overcame their differences. People who otherwise would disagree with me on everything from energy policy to religion were standing beside me. They were standing with me, and I with them. That is important, and it is terrifying to the government. Because in Canada, we don't have the protections that some other countries do. I've already mentioned how we live under the illusion of freedom. But when it comes down to it, and we need to stand up for those freedoms, we don't have a militia by the people to protect against tyrannical government. We don't have the right to bear arms. Because as Canadians, that's not what we are. We are not violent. We don't use weapons to change minds. We use words. Do you remember what Maxime Bernier said when he was arrested? Mr. Bernier, do you have any weapons on you? Only my words. That's what we have in Canada. And now it's gotten to a point where we unite as a country. We travel thousands of kilometers and meet in Ottawa at our parliament where we go to speak, to be heard. And our Prime Minister stomps on it. He uses his RCMP and his military to beat those people in the streets. So in Canada, our weapons are our bruises. They're our teary eyes from tear gas. That's our weapons. And that's all we have. And that's why I'm going back to Ottawa, because there's people still there standing up for their rights and speaking up for themselves and others, and they're getting beat down. And I say, as Canadians, unfortunately, that's what we have to do. We have to continue to go and speak our voice and get beat up and get back up again and go to the front of the line and speak up again. Get thrown in jail for nothing, get out of jail, go back and speak out again. Because without that, without our voices, what do we have? We have nothing else. We can't look to the police to save us. We can't look to the RCMP and say, my charter rights are being violated, can you help me? They can't, and they won't. And all the things I've said today, all this rant that I go on every time I get a microphone, that screams we need change in this country and in this province. And I'm not going to get into my political views too much right now. This is one thing Glenn and I disagree on, is the path forward. Our path forward, regardless of what it is, needs to be unified. Parties mean nothing. Yeah, Glenn agrees with me on that. Parties mean nothing. Politics means nothing. We need every person in Alberta to stand up and speak out and at least agree that our path forward has to include the ability to express ourselves and disagree in the future, because we don't have that right now. If we disagree with the government right now, they call us a small fringe minority, they send in people and they beat us in the streets. And that's not acceptable in my eyes.
No. Let's get rid of Kenny.
I agree. And you know what? One of the hardest things I had to do over the last couple of weeks is I had to give Kenny some props. Because as everyone in this room probably knows, Jason Kenney and I don't speak eye to eye. Probably because he's 5 feet tall. But the way I look at it, Jason Kenney is a politician, and he's a very good one. He's very shrewd, he's very smart, he's never lost. And the reason for that is because he knows that whatever he does has to go with the winds of public opinion, right? He is a poll hound. And if we're dealing with politicians who are poll hounds, and we know that, we can direct them to do what we want if we're unified. We unified and said, we want these mandates gone. We don't want our kids in masks. We don't want to force people to take a vax. And all of a sudden, now Jason Kenney is speaking out against the ATA, who are trying to mask our children. He's suing the federal government over the Emergency Measures Act because the winds of public opinion support it. So I had to say, Jason Kenney, you threw me in jail, you've decimated the province, but good job sticking up for the children. Because that's what they hear. If they hear us cheering them on and saying, yeah, you're doing a good job, when they're doing what we want them to do, they'll continue to do that. Because they only want to get reelected. Personally, I don't give a crap if I ever get elected to office, and if I do, I don't really care if I stay there. The only thing that our elected representatives should be doing is speaking our voice in wherever they're at, whether it's the House of Commons or in the legislature. Speaking our voice, doing what they know is right. Period. Not chasing polls, not pandering to groups that give them a bunch of money, doing what's right and representing the people. Does that sound like a good plan going forward? With that said, unfortunately, in Canada, unless something changes federally, and I don't know how that can happen. I mean, we have a Conservative Party that basically stood idly by and watched Canada be decimated, watched our federal workers lose their jobs, and they only spoke up at the last minute when those winds of public opinion changed, and they thought that's what was going to get them re-elected. So in my eyes, I'll do a little bit of political stuff here. And independent Alberta is the only answer.
Yeah, that's right.
The only one. And that does not mean that I hate Canada. I love Canada. I love Canada to the point where I will go and I will get tear gassed for my fellow Canadians. I don't have a problem with that. However, I also love my mother. But I didn't live in my mom's house forever because I wanted to live under my own rules and prosper on my own. And that's how I feel right now as an Albertan. especially watching what's going on in Canada right now, specifically Ottawa, watching people's rights and freedoms be trampled on because our laws allow it. They are allowed to do this to us. And even if it comes out 5 years from now that they weren't allowed, they just wipe their hands of it. Oh, okay, whatever. No. That doesn't work for me. We need to live in a place where the rule of law exists, and it's to the benefit of the people, not to the benefit of the government. And at the very core, the heart of our problems in the province and in the country is that the laws are designed to protect the government and keep them in power. And that has to change.
Yes, it does.
If we can't change that, we'll live like this forever. And I'm just going to point out one more thing. I think I've taken too much time. Our brothers and sisters down south in the United States, they're watching. And they see what's going on, and they feel for us. A congresswoman in New Mexico actually put a bill forth saying New Mexico would open their borders to Canadian truckers who are protesting and give them asylum. When this, if nothing else, should make Justin Trudeau the most embarrassed person on the planet. In Canada, the freest country on earth, where teachers tell children that you can do anything you want and you're protected by the Charter and you have the Bill of Rights. Canada, the United States, is offering Canadians asylum. Now, what message does that send to our federal politicians and the people in our province, who, by the way, have the power to end this for Albertans? Our provincial government tomorrow could say, no, we're not having any of this Emergency Measures Act. We're going to use the notwithstanding clause, and we're standing on our own because what you're doing is wrong. Our MLAs have failed us. Every single one of them. These MLAs, I'll tell you this, and I said it before, 7 of them had a meeting with some of the doctors and scientists you saw in Ottawa, and they told them what the government is doing is not only ineffective and illogical, but it is harming and killing people. There's a 10-year-old boy in Calgary right now, and you can guess which medical procedure he had. All of a sudden, his body's exploding with cancer. And it's not an isolated case. These MLAs had meetings, and they knew. They heard it right from these people. One of the men who spoke to them was a medical advisor to the White House. Our MLAs knew, and they didn't do anything. And I've spoken to them. And you know what they say? Why they said they didn't do anything? Well, what we see on TV doesn't agree with that. And we don't want to stand alone and look like extremists. I'm sorry, but saving the lives of Alberta is extreme? What the hell is going on with our government? Our MLAs won't do anything. Our premier only does something when he thinks he's going to get re-elected. If ever there was a reason for Canadians to be marching through the streets and demanding change, it is now. Because those who we elected to do it are not doing it.
Go, Chris.
Archer Pawlowski still in jail. Denied bail on a mischief charge. And you know what the real reason he's still in jail for? Or the real reason is? Because he's embarrassing the government. He's embarrassing the police services, as are those protesters in Ottawa. They are embarrassing the government. They are showing Canada that the science never supported what they did to us. They are showing Canada that what the government has done has cost Canadians lives and livelihoods and family connections and social interactions. They are embarrassed and they're terrified. And knowing that tells me that this isn't going to get better before it gets worse. We are going to get some bruises. Some of us will probably go back to jail. But I can guarantee you, if men like me and Glenn, if we ever have our voices in those, what I call now the pathetic, non-influential buildings, i.e. the legislature, if we ever have our voices in there or in Parliament, all of these people who've been persecuted throughout this, pardoned, all of these fines, gone. Public inquiries into the men and women who forced this on us, and accountability. I had to go to jail because I didn't listen to a judge. I was in contempt of court because I held a protest. I went to jail for that. What should happen to these folks who pushed this on us and killed people, destroyed our faith in government, destroyed our faith in those that we thought were there to protect us, and damn near destroyed our country? Jail? I would say so.
I'd say a lot higher.
So we may go through a whole bunch of tribulations before that point, but the silver lining here, and I've tried hard to look at the silver lining throughout this whole thing, the silver lining is there are some lions who are awakening. And judging from the greeting that I received when I walked up here, there's a lot of people supporting them. And you know what that means? There's two things. Number one, it means that every person in this room and in Alberta, we have work to do. Because this little group here, this is a big group. I mean, the building's full, but there's 4.5 million people in Alberta and what, 38 million or something in Canada? We have a lot of people to reach. We need to start meeting people where they're at and sharing this message and getting through to them on an emotional basis to change their minds about what's going on, to get them on this page. We have a lot of work to do. This is the biggest political and societal campaign in Canadian history, because it means either taking back our country and our province and going forward as free and prosperous citizens, or continuing down the road we're on. And when in history has a government ever gotten some power and given it up? Yes, so that's the first thing. We all have a lot of work to do. We have to start reaching people on a personal level, because this doesn't go out to as many people as you think. A lot of people in Alberta, I meet them and I start talking about some groups I'm involved with, and they're like, well, who's that? And my answer is always like, what do you mean? Don't you follow the Whistle Stop Facebook page? Come on. And the second thing, now this is the really exciting part. If we can build on the momentum of what's happening in Canada right now, the tens of thousands of people that I saw in the streets with handmade signs, throwing hamburgers in the window of the truck, throwing money at truckers and people in cars, kids on the side of the road with signs that said, "Thank you for standing up for my future." If we can build on that momentum and keep this idea of unity rolling, we will win. And we'll get through this with some bumps and bruises. We'll have to probably pardon some people out of jail. And we'll move forward as a unified and free Canada. Or at the very least, a free Alberta. And I think that probably concludes my sermon for the day. I guess if anybody has any questions, I could take one or two. Although I've taken all of Daniel's time, I think. Sorry, Daniel. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, Hey, what's wrong with being fat? You're absolutely right. We need to get not only more political, and let me point out two things here. First one, yes, we need to keep pressure on our MLAs, but very few people actually realize who controls the MLAs. It's not necessarily the entire constituency. There's a group of people. They sit on a board. It's called a constituency association board. And oftentimes, on those boards, people who are there, their job is to tell the MLAs what the constituents want. Because it's very hard for, say, Ron Orr to have 50,000 people come up to him and speak. It's a lot easier for those people to communicate it in their communities and then bring a message to Ron, and then Ron brings it to the Premier. Those CA boards are filled with people who have self-serving interests to be there. Because people like me, we don't go and do that. We don't take time out of our days or weeks to go and do something for free, like sit on a CA board. The people that do are those that they tend to benefit financially from influencing policy. Their businesses thrive because they tell their MLAs they want this done, and they do it, and then there's, just whatever, there's zoning and grants and stuff like that. So those boards, those people need to be identified and held accountable. And that comes down to personal relationships. Something that in Canada, over the last 30 years, we have been getting away from. We don't meet people on personal levels anymore. We hide behind our phones and we share cat videos, which is awesome, but it's not effective. So we need to start engaging with those CA board members and making sure that the message they're sending to our MLAs is effective. Thank you. So yes, we definitely need to get involved. And the second thing, involvement doesn't always mean politics. Involvement sometimes means doing something like Freedom Convoy 2022 2.0 and getting thousands of people in cars and trucks driving to Ottawa and exercising their lawful right to protest. Follow the Whistle Stop Facebook page for more information on that. Is there anyone else? Oh, go ahead. Okay, so you're talking about the AGM and removing Kenny. I am supportive of removing Kenny. However, in my mind, it's irrelevant. At this point for me, Jason Kenney is completely irrelevant to the conversation. And the reason I say that, it's not that I don't support those who are participating in the AGM to remove Premier Kenney. I think that would send a great message. However, I'm very split on it. Because in order to do that, we have to hand the UCP a lot of money. We have to buy the privilege of having a vote, which is disturbing. I'm not going to encourage anyone either way to either do it or not do it. I'll say this. If it's on your heart and you think it's the right thing to do that and try and remove Kenny from his position, go for it and give it all you got. But remember, or maybe you don't know this, Jason Kenney likely didn't become the leader of the UCP because he played by the rules. And if you think he's going to play by the rules again, I don't know. I don't agree. So, if that's on your heart to do that, give her. If it's not, don't. The most important thing that we can do as individuals is spread this message that something needs to change. Invite people to meetings like this where people are giving ideas about how we can move forward. That's the real power. Because Jason Kenney does what the polls tell him is going to get reelected. And if the polls told him at this point that fighting Trudeau, getting rid of the mandates, putting in legislation that wouldn't allow this to happen again, if the polls said that would make him win, he will do it. He blows at the winds of opinion. So, I think that's all I got. Hopefully, because is it like 9 o'clock now? Okay. Thank you very much.